I really enjoy doing projects where I get to work with brand new hardware that I haven't even taken out of the box before, because that means that along with you guys now, I am also discovering the benefits, the quirks, the problems, the features of these new components, and can talk to you guys about my experience working with them for the very first time. And that's what we are doing here today. We've got some brand new stuff on the table. We're going to put it all in a system build together along with some of the best gaming components on the market today. And we're going to build ourselves a killer 1440p gaming system and see how it runs. So if you guys are new here to the BPS Customs YouTube channel, thank you for tuning in to this week's build. Make sure you get subscribed down below and also hit that notification icon if you like what you see here and you want to catch more of this kind of content every single week. Now, as far as this build goes, we're going to talk about our new stuff first, and we're going to start out with our case. This is Corsair's brand new 4000D Airflow version. Although Corsair did come out with 3 different variants of their new 4000 series cases, I think the 4000D Airflow is really where you want to be for a PC builder. First, it has a full airflow front mesh panel. Now, this serves 2 purposes. It allows you to see through to your fans, almost the same as a tempered glass panel would, and obviously also it's going to promote a lot of fresh airflow into the interior to cool your components, whereas a front glass panel is not going to do that. So I think if you're going to go with one of these 4000 series cases, the airflow version is probably the smartest choice, although I do see some merit in going with the 4000X RGB version, which comes with 3 of their LL series fans and an RGB controller. So there's some value proposition there, but keep in mind that this 4000D Airflow version is only $80 US. So it's fairly fully featured, it's a good size for building, it fits the majority of components, and it's only 80 bucks. So you can use the extra funds that you're saving over the 4000X and add your own fans. There are a couple very subtle things that I like that Corsair did here. The side panel is no longer fastened by thumb screws that go through the panel. Instead, it's got little pegs at the back and captive thumb screws that secure it, that help you pop the panel off. They have little colored accents on the top and on the front as far as their new Corsair yellow goes, and you'll see the same thing on this new cooler. That isn't necessarily for everybody, and I understand if maybe you're not a huge fan of yellow, but it's not intrusive. You could still build the system in any color configuration you want, and it's a nice little accent piece. Our second brand new component is also from Corsair. This is their new cooler. This is their H115i Elite Capellax 280mm all-in-one liquid cooler, and it's got some IQ branding on it as well. The names keep getting longer. The products also do keep getting incrementally better. So this is basically a very small revision on their previous H115i. It's almost the same thing, except it does come with their Capellax LEDs, which are very low power and very low heat generating. So this does make for a slight improvement in power efficiency, and also should theoretically allow you to cool a little bit better because you don't have to worry about dissipating the heat from your lights. Whether or not that really bears out, I don't really know. They said to me that generally the cooler is very similar to the previous generation and performance impact shouldn't be that high. However, any small improvements are certainly welcome, and we're going to try this one out today. And our last brand new component is maybe the one that I'm most excited about, which is really weird to say about a power supply. Now, this is a disclaimer, but this power supply, as awesome as it looks and as awesome as it probably performs, is unnecessary for this kind of a project. This is Be Quiet's new Dark Power Pro 12 1500 watt unit. The Dark Power Pro 12 comes in 1200 or 1500, and either one is going to be overkill for this kind of a system. So just keep that in mind. However, it came into the office and I did want to try it out. It's 80 plus titanium rated. Of course, it's fully modular. Of course, it looks beautiful. And it has a frameless fan design for basically silent operation and a 10-year warranty and generally really high level of build quality. And I do trust Be Quiet when it comes to power supplies. And when they showed this off at CES this year, I actually was really excited to get it into the studio even though it's just a power supply, and generally you don't even see them. But this one is really sweet, and thank you very much to Be Quiet for sending it over for use in this build, even though we don't really need it here. Just as a point of reference, if you're building along at home, don't spend whatever this costs on a power supply. Go out and get yourself a good 80 plus gold rated 650 or 750 watt unit. That should last you for a long time. Now, the rest of our components we have used before. We're going to be using an SSD from HP. This is their EX950 M.2 drive. It's an NVMe drive, 1 terabyte, and that's pretty much the standard moving forward on this channel, I think, is what we're going to be using in almost all of our builds. Our processor today is going to be Intel's 10700K, 8 cores and 16 threads. We have used it on the channel before. It's basically the 9900K replacement for less money. It is also more widely available than the 10900K, and games basically just as well. If you're building a system today strictly for gaming and you want the best gaming performance and you don't necessarily want to spend the absolute most money, the 10700K is an easy recommendation for me right now. We're going to be pairing that with this motherboard from Asus. This is the ROG Strix Z490E gaming board. We used this in our initial 10900K build, and it was awesome. It looks great. It provides really good overclocking support and a ton of features. And you can always kind of fall back and count on Strix boards to be super consistent and solid when it comes to a build like this. For graphics, this might be the last time on this channel that you are seeing this kind of a card because of the introduction of the new RTX 30 series. This is the RTX 2070 Super from Gigabyte. This is their gaming OC8G version. It is 2-slot card. It has really good cooling capacity for what it is, and it looks pretty good too. So this definitely should fit in with the theme of our system and give us really good 1440p gaming performance. And the last component is memory. Corsair's Vengeance RGB Pro 4x8 GB kit should fit in really well, both with our build aesthetic and with our performance targets. I might accent our system with some custom cables. We'll see as I complete the build if I feel that that's appropriate. But other than that, I think we are good to go. So let's put this all together in the 4000D Airflow case and see what kind of gaming results that we get. All right, so we got some things to talk about here. The very first thing is you probably noticed, unfortunately, there was no build montage time-lapse footage this time around like we normally do here, and I apologize for that. I shoot that with my B cam, and I guess the SD card is corrupt. I shot quite a bit of build footage here and went to edit it just before shooting this outro, and nothing. So, sorry about that. You'll see the build footage starting again, I guess, next time around. The second thing is that you have probably noticed by now that the memory kit we're using here is not these. These are our Corsair Vengeance RGB Pros, and I thought that it would really look good in here, especially considering that the tint on the side panel glass is pretty heavy, and as a result, you can't really see into it all that well unless you have a good amount of light inside, and these were definitely going to help out. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you guys have probably theorized by now, it was a space conflict issue with our cooler. Now, this case, the 4000D airflow is an appropriate size for the majority of builds. It's not small, but it's not huge. As a result, though, it causes problems when you're using a larger AIO like a 280 because the width of the radiator is going to potentially interfere with things you have coming off of the motherboard depending on not only their height, but their positioning on the board. So with the Strix board, the positioning of the memory modules, and the width of the 280mm cooler, it meant that we couldn't fit these in. It wasn't even close to fitting. So what I did was I actually went and I tried a different kit of memory. These are Thermaltake water RAM modules, obviously without the water block on top, but as you can see, they are pretty slim, pretty low profile, and they look pretty good too. Unfortunately, even these were too tall to fit in here. I had to go with basically the lowest profile stuff that I have a 4x8 gig kit of, and that was Corsair Vengeance LPX, which at this point is kind of like the go-to for a basic memory kit. It's relatively inexpensive, it is very stable, it works with basically every platform, and it fits in basically every build because of its height. So if you guys are ever having these kinds of memory conflict issues and you're worried that you're not going to be able to fit your memory modules in with your cooler and your case, just kind of default back to these. They almost always will fit. So that's what we went with here. It's the same speed memory, it's 3200, and I didn't have any issues running it at that speed. However, I would have liked a little more bling inside of our case, and that's really why I was a little disappointed I wasn't able to use these Vengeance Pros. The third thing is that you could see an orange cable set in here. This is a CableMod Pro set. It's orange and white and light gray, and I don't often do a lot of orange builds. I have done them before on the channel, but I really do like the whole orange and black color scheme. Again, I do wish there was a little more lighting inside the case so that it would really be set off by the cables, and I think that the LL fans that come with the 4000X RGB version of this case would really help in that regard, especially considering that the side panel glass on this case is pretty heavily tinted, and with the side panel on, it's kind of hard to see in. Now, a contributing factor to that is that the lighting on both our GPU and our motherboard is honestly pretty dim, and that's probably the biggest fault of these components. They both work great, but the lighting on them really could maybe use a little more power. So unfortunately, with the side panel on, it does not really pop with the same kind of vibrance that you might expect, especially considering that the cooler and the fans from Corsair actually look great, but it is a little bit difficult to see them. With all that out of the way though, let's talk about the actual build and the performance of this system. The 4000D Airflow case is a pretty standard build experience with really no surprises at all. I was really pleased with the overall layout, and the positioning of a lot of the cutouts and the size of a lot of the cutouts for cable routing is actually almost perfect. I was very happy with being able to route things the way I needed to and being able to hide some cables where you don't necessarily want to see them. So good job, Corsair, on that. Temperatures in this case were also really good, even despite the fact that we only had the one intake fan at the front. I think if we populated that entire front with 120mm fans, you'd get even lower temperatures, even though the one that's in there right now is basically blowing directly on the GPU, which did contribute to decent GPU temps while gaming, and also really nice sustained boost clocks. When I was running through my suite of tests, as we always do here, the GPU was maintaining 2000 megahertz plus almost at all times, and it really peaked around somewhere like 55 to 57 Celsius, even under heavy load, which is great. It definitely means that you're going to get the best performance you can out of the 2070 Super and not be limited by any temperature ceilings. The CPU was running between 50 and 55 C. It did spike up a little bit during Far Cry, but Far Cry New Dawn is notoriously CPU intensive, so that's probably why. If you were running something like Adobe Premiere or Cinebench for some reason, if you really wanted to run a lot of Cinebench, you'd probably see temperatures a little bit higher than that. But a 280 millimeter cooler for the 10700K processor is more than enough. And the new Corsair H115i really does seem up to the task. No complaints there at all. That cooler does come with a Commander Core, which is a combination lighting and fan control hub. But just keep in mind, it's not your standard ARGB hub. So you can't just go plugging any components into it. It's made for Corsair's proprietary connector for their fans and for their coolers. So yes, you do have to use it with this cooler because otherwise the pump top has nothing to plug into to light up. So you do have to use it, but it does provide additional connectivity for other fans and other Corsair peripherals if you want to connect to them for lighting control. And then you just use iCUE to configure everything. On the performance side of things, at 1440p and all ultra settings, we obviously got some great gaming results. Far Cry New Dawn was running at an average of 95 FPS. Doom Eternal, which is just crazy optimized, was running around 170 frames per second. And to be honest, I'd be interested to see what the 4K performance of Doom Eternal would be with a 2070 Super. I'm pretty sure I could probably run it. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, 70.2 frames per second on average throughout that test. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 92 frames per second on average, and also very impressive frame times, very consistent frame times. So you didn't see any spikes at all when running that test, which indicates that the 1% and 0.1% lows are also quite high. Ghost Recon Wildlands, a very difficult test to run, averaged about 60 frames per second, and that's probably as expected. But overall, really good results, especially when targeting 1440p performance. This isn't a 4K gaming box. It's not supposed to be. It doesn't have a new 30 series card. The 2070 Super is more than enough GPU for most people, for most applications. And I think that if you're going to be targeting 1440p, you don't necessarily need a 3080 unless for some reason you want to get up into, over 200 frames per second. The last thing I did want to talk about is the power supply. Now, this thing is just enormous. It is way too big and way too overkill for a build like this, like we mentioned in the intro. Everything works and everything fits, but I did have to take out the drive cage in order to make sure that all the cabling fit down there, especially because the power supply itself takes up at least half of this shroud. And that's a little absurd. You typically wouldn't see something that big in a build like this. But Be Quiet definitely did it when it comes to aesthetics and features on a power supply, and I commend them for that. But, like we touched on already, don't put that power supply in this kind of a build, even though it does come with some pretty nice individually sleeved cables. The cables themselves are pretty thin, pretty low gauge, pretty high gauge. And I definitely would prefer something like the cable mod cables, but you don't necessarily need them if you want a good looking system and you buy that power supply because it does come with them already. But just keep it in mind that you do have to consider the size of your power supply sometimes, and this is one of the biggest that I've ever seen. So that is a wrap on today's build. I hope you guys enjoyed our 1440p gaming machine with the 10700K and the 2070 Super. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys would have changed anything or done anything differently with this build, or if you would suggest any changes to the case itself. If you like this case or if you think it's not a good value or whatever, sound off down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, as always, like we said before, make sure you get subscribed if you want to see more of this kind of content. We do builds like this every single week here on the channel. Next week, I actually will be on vacation. So just so you guys know, we will be skipping a week. But I do look forward to getting back into it, doing some more builds, and let me know what you guys want to see. So thank you so much for watching, as always, and we will see you next time.